This is The Debrief with Tyler Burns.
Here we go. This is the dive team out here checking it out. Man, the weather out here is fantastic. Suspect said he was going to be somewhere between there and somewhere midway. He's not for sure. I mean, I would think that the gun probably wouldn't travel very far. This might be like finding a crack rock in a salt factory. They've got a really big magnet, and they literally pick that gun up and put it on it. That's pretty cool. I'd kind of like to be in a swimming shorts and go down there and start looking. I got to take a look on that other side of the bridge. This is a neat bridge. This is Route 66. This thing has been closed off for decades.
Crawl underneath there.
That'd be cool. And something Nathan would not approve of.
Forgiveness, not permission.
Oh, man, freaking spider webs, dude.
Don't be scared. Crawl out there so I can get picture.
Can you see me? Dude, I'm really afraid of heights, so this is not fun. That's pretty cool in there, man. I'm just shocked that you're not just seeing several guns laying all over this thing. You would think that this would be a popular drop-off spot. I'm just shocked you guys haven't found other guns.
This is the first time in 30 years that we've ever searched this 11th Street Bridge area.
Thank you for coming out.
Yeah, this is episode 29 of The Debrief, and I've got my co-host Cody Randall here. Cody, how are you?
Good. How is
We've
everybody
got
else today?
We've got a very special guest on the show, Jason White. Jason, how are you?
I'm great. It's good to be here, Tyler. Hello, Cody.
Hey.
I am super stoked about this episode. So I was telling Cody a little bit ago about how I met you. Actually met you through when my wife was at the Corner Conference down in Indianapolis. I think that was about 2 years ago now. And I rode my motorcycle down there just to have a little getaway time and meet up with her. And we had gone out to dinner with the rest of the Corners from the area. And then we hung out with you in the bar area and listened to some of your stories and just kind of chat back and forth. And that was a great time.
Oh, it was. It was a good time. Lots of laughs, for sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, Jason, why don't you kind of start off? Where'd you grow up and what was life growing up like for you?
Well, I started out in California. I was born in San Jose, and then we moved up to the Sierra Nevada mountains in a place called Volcano, California, which is a really neat town. And we lived up in that area, and then we moved from there. My father got on the California Highway Patrol when I was a little kid, and so then we moved down to Los Angeles when he completed the academy, and then we lived in Santa Monica, Sherman Oaks, and then we moved to a place called Canyon Country, and then we ultimately moved back up to the Sierra Nevada mountains it's between Sacramento and Lake Tahoe. So it's a real pretty area of California, Sutter Creek, California to be exact. And then when I was 12, we ended up moving to Oklahoma. My aunt had moved out here, and she told my dad, she goes, "This place is the greatest place ever, and everything is just really cheap, and it's not a bad place to live." And California was, it was really tough for us to to live there. It was really expensive. And so my dad flew out
Why-
there and do what?
Why were you guys moving around so much?
Well, the loss, when we moved down to LA, it's just basically, we started out in an apartment on 15th and Santa Monica Boulevard, and which was cool because I could actually see the ocean on a clear day from like a little window in my closet. And then from there, we just upgraded to another apartment in a better area. It was actually it was like at the base of the Hollywood Hills. And then, although we were in it was like right there, where that leads up into the Hollywood Hills and stuff where the stars lived. And then from there, my parents bought a house. And, back then I think that house cost, when they bought it, I want to say it was like $80,000, which was that's a ton of money back in the 70s. And now I think that house, it's like 1,100 square foot. I think the thing is sold for like $700,000. Like, I don't know how the heck anybody affords anything there, but that's how we ended up. And then we just ended up moving back up. My dad left the highway patrol, and then we ended up back up in Northern California. And that's still one of my favorite places to live. It was just an awesome place to grow up as a kid and run wild. It's just great. That back then, and how, I don't know how old you guys are, but back when I was a kid, man, when after cartoons on Saturday, man, you were out the door and you didn't come home until you better hear your parents yelling or you'd be in big trouble. But
The
you
good
were
old days.
Oh yeah, it was great. What a great time to grow up, And then we moved to Oklahoma, and I had to literally look it up on the map to see where it was at, and I literally thought that people would be wearing cowboy boots and cowboy hats here, and I didn't know what to expect. And I remember telling my parents almost daily that the moment I turn 18, I'm moving back to California, and there's nothing you can do about it. And something happened. I actually started falling in love with it. By the time I turned 18, I was like, I kind of like it here, And so that's how it happened. And so I started out in Mustang, Oklahoma, and from there or Mustang, Yukon area. Yukon's the home of Garth Brooks. That's what it's known for. And then, which is technically, it's in Oklahoma city limits. And then I went to Mustang High School, and then from there, I know that this is like first responders is kind of your theme on your show. So I ended up getting my EMT, my basic EMT. I accomplished that the last semester of my senior year of high school. And then I experienced how hard it was to get a real job because nobody would hire me, So they said, "Oh, we just need you to have a little experience, and then we'll give you a look." And you know how that goes.
Got the cert, but not the experience.
So from there, I ended up getting somebody had recommended to me the burn center, just burn center. And so I interviewed with them, and I was a month out of high school. I was working at McDonald's, and a month out of high school, they gave me a chance. They started me out at $4.50 an hour, and my job was to debride you. If you were burned, I worked in the tank room, and I would debride you, and which is basically, not to be graphic, but it's removal of all your burn tissue, basically. And then I would do burn dressing changes, and I did that for a long time. It's the fourth largest burn center in the country. So that's where I started out. And then I went on to surgery, and I was a scrub tech on a neurosurgical team. And then from there, I went on to an open heart surgery team. So I worked 10 years in the medical field in total before becoming a police officer with the city of Tulsa.
What? Did you have any siblings?
I have one brother. My brother's about 6.5 years younger than me, and he is actually, he was a game show host on Nickelodeon back in the 90s. And he,
Really?
arguably the worst game show in the history of that network. It was called You're On, and so that he would go fly to Orlando, and he'd film like the whole season in like 2 weeks. And so he did that for a couple of seasons, and he actually was
Remember that show though?
Are you serious? My God.
Yeah.
That's crazy. You're like the first person that's ever remembered it. So
No, I very distinctly remember it. I don't know why, but
because it was so bad, it was terrible. But nevertheless, it was still pretty cool that I could tell people, hey, my brother's on Nickelodeon. And so he did that, and then he was like a guest host on another show, or not a guest host, but he was one of the contestants. He would make like 6 or 7 appearances on that show called Figure It Out, where they drop the green slime on your head. And so he did that.
That was a great show.
It was.
I remember
And,
that one too.
yeah, well,
Not
that
just
one was
the
actually
obscure ones.
well, that was actually a really popular show, and so he did that. And while he was doing that, his he kept getting told, "Hey, you need to get an agent, and you need to get an agent in L.A. or New York." And my brother, he started thinking about it, and he says, you know what I really probably should do is I should go to school and get my, and he did, and he got he became a lawyer, and then he was going to do the acting thing on the side. You know, he was going to go back to it, and he just never did. So right now, he just left the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics as their legal counsel, and he is now returned, or actually for the first time, he's going to the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. He's going to be their legal counsel. So his former boss is now the director, and he pulled him along, and that's what they're going to do. So it's an exciting time for him. I'm really proud of him, and I'll have to live a little vicariously through his life because I kind of wanted to. I almost went to the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation about a year and a half ago, but I stayed at Tulsa. So that's it in a nutshell. I mean, I know that we're going to get into deeper other things that I've done, but that kind of gives you the roadmap of at least where I've lived and a little bit along the way.
Yeah. So when you got your EMT, did you work on a truck or what did you do with that?
No, actually, I got hired by an ambulance company. It was called Metropolitan Ambulance Service, and they told me, I don't know what your big ambulance service is in where you live there in Indiana, but in Oklahoma, the big one's IMSA, and so they have a crews in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. That's where they're out of, both of the big cities. And I remember the Metropolitan Ambulance Service, which was basically a transport service, taking old people from the hospital to a nursing home and stuff like that. And they were gonna pay me more money. They were gonna pay me like $5.50 an hour. They were excited. Technically, I'm pretty sure they hired me actually. I just never started with them. And when I had the opportunity at the burn center, you know, of course, I tried to get on all these different emergency rooms and stuff, and I just couldn't get a job. So the burn center, to me, I was willing to take less money to go there. It just to me, it seemed like it was a better choice for experience. And sometimes you got to take a sacrifice, and that's what I did. And it's the best decision I ever made. Still to this day, it's one of my favorite jobs I ever had, honestly.
So
I'm kind of like a burn expert still to this day. When somebody gets burned, occasionally I'll get a call. Hey man, I need you to come look at this. And hey, what can we do to this? Well, we can start breeding it. So if you want me to get to work, I will. But
what
I've done that.
what was work in the burn center like? I mean, you probably had just about the worst job, in my personal opinion. I know you say you loved working there, but just the debreeding of the burns, to me, that does not sound like a fun job. So I guess what aspect of it kind of piqued your interest?
Well, you know, I remember touring it when I was a kid. I was an Explorer Scout at that same hospital. So I was a member of the Search and Rescue Explorers at that hospital, which is a great program anyway. And we toured the burn center. And what was kind of neat about it was almost like it was kind of a place that you just couldn't go and just walk the halls. You had to go up there. You had to wash your hands, and then you had to put on a gown. As a visitor, you would have to put on a gown, because the number one killer to a burn patient is infection. So they were very, very careful about that. And I just remember it was just one of those places. It's got a weird smell to it. It really does. It has like a different, all that sylvanine and it's just got a different, unique smell to it. And I remember it's a 32-bed unit. It had 17 rehab beds. It had 10 acute, and then it had 5 ICU beds. And we were, like I said, the 4th in the country. So we would get burns from all over the state. And it was just an interesting place to work. I remember my first day there, unbeknownst to me, the boss told the crew, "Hey, we're going to give this kid a chance. It's probably not going to work out, but we're going to give him a chance." And the average turnover rate for somebody at the burn center is 11.7 months before somebody ends up quitting. It's an incredibly challenging place to work just because of what we're dealing with. I mean, you're working. It's similar to that of, the way I put it, it's we'd have a psychiatrist that would come through there once a week just to kind of chat with us. I thought he was just hanging out, but technically what he was doing is he was just chatting with us to make sure we were okay. And at least I learned that later, because you're like almost working in a slaughterhouse. It's the wounds that you're looking at are horrific. and you're inflicting pain on people, really. And actually, pain is good. You want pain because that means that the burns aren't near as bad. The worse the burn, the less it hurts. And so that's I don't know. It was just an interesting place. I remember my first day when I went in there. There was a guy. There was the burn patient's name is, and I'm not upheld to HIPAA. They didn't have HIPAA then, but his name was Cornelius Hamilton was his name, and he was the first guy. He was burned 68% welding, and he'd been there for a long time. This guy actually, they'd been taking skin from the top of his scalp. I've never seen that. I've never seen it since then, and that's how much they had to take skin grafts from his body. They were running out of spots, and so they literally had to take it off of his scalp. And he was a black guy. I remember they were so busy at the time. There was a couple of other physical therapists that worked in that room, and they came over to me and they said, "Listen, we don't have time to really train you right now, but here's how you take out a couple of staples." And so I remember and Cornelius, he was sitting there looking at me like, "Oh my gosh, no, please don't let this kid do this on me." Because I was a kid, you know? And so I started to work, and I learned right then and there. My best teachers were the burn patients. Really, they taught me how to work there, and so what an experience! And it was just, it was incredible. We did have one incident. I don't want to keep going on here. I want to give you guys a chance, but we did have one incident that happened in 1989, and I started there in '88. But we had 3 firefighters that got burned just severely. Jimmy Ayers was one of the names, and the other one was we got 2 of them in the burn center. The other young man, he ended up dying. I think his name was Jeff Lindsay or something Lindsay, his first name. But Benny Zelder and Jimmy Ayers, they came into the burn center, and Jimmy Ayers ended up living like 24 hours, and then he died. And then Benny Zellner lived a couple of weeks, and then he died. And the crazy part was that Benny Zellner, his wife worked there. She was a registered nurse in the burn center. Can you believe that? I mean, and then here comes your husband rolling through the doors. But that was probably one of the biggest, most notable incidents. It might have been the last time that they've lost a firefighter in Oklahoma City, actually, and then they lost 3 because of that incident. But anyway, it was just an interesting place to work. It was high stress. It was. I can't imagine my children doing that job. I've tried to think, could my kids do something like that? And I don't know, but they took me in and they taught me the ropes, and it was a great place to start out and be able to learn how to deal with stressful situations and remain calm. And that's paid dividends for me throughout my career, believe me, still to this day.
What made you move on from that did you move on to the heart side of things after that?
Well, what happened is I was in the burn center. I was walking around and doing whatever I was doing, and some orderly came walking through there, and he goes, "Hey man, did you put in for that scrub school?" And I was like, "Scrub school? What's scrub school?" And he goes, "It's a scrub tech program." And I'm like, "What the heck is a scrub tech?" I didn't even know what that was. And he goes, "Yeah, today's the deadline, man. You're going to have to put your application in today, and it's over with. They're not accepting any more applicants." And they're the people that slap the instruments in the surgeon's hands. And apparently the hospital that I worked at, they had a shortage of them. So they were in a critical position where they needed to run. They bought the curriculum. They were going to run a program through there. And so I went to my boss. I said, "Hey, listen, I got to leave," because I needed to get like my high school transcript, and I needed to get something together to be able to turn in for this application. And she said, "No." And I said, "You don't understand. I'm leaving right now. You're going to have to let me leave because I got to go do this. I have to do this." And so she let me leave. And I took off. I ran around, and I ended up getting my application in late. And so it was a 4-month program that it was full-time, 4 months. You didn't get paid to be in it. And let me tell you something. I owned a house then. I was 19 years old. I already owned a house. I had a couple of cars, a house. I know. My dad came home and said, "You're buying a house today." I bought my first house for like $23,000, and I was struggling, man. My house payment was like $267 a month, and I was trying to work the burn center in the evenings whenever I could, just to make ends meet, And so I managed to get through this program, and if they liked you, then what they would do is they would interview you for the respective positions of the different teams. And so you would interview for the heart team, the neuro team, ortho, stuff like that, general surgery, plastics, or actually, yeah, I think we had plastics on ours. So you'd interview for the various teams and the neuro team. So I specialized primarily in brains, backs, and reconstructive burn surgeries. And to tell you the truth, I kind of love sharing this. I actually did some burn surgeries. The doctor would come in there. There was a couple of doctors that would say, "Hey, we can get out of here a lot quicker if Jason just does this surgery and we get out on our way." And the nurses would just stand there like, and I would just do the surgery, like a surgical debridement, and go to town on them because they were asleep. I could do things that down there that I couldn't do upstairs to these people. And so I'd be on one side doing skin grafts and grafting people, and while they're on the other side doing the other side. It was pretty crazy. And but so I got to do that, and then occasionally I would maybe go to a different, like, fill in on the heart team over there. And so I've been on heart transplants and stuff like that with some real legends in the state of Oklahoma. And then from there, the only way to make real money in the medical field is to leave a hospital. If you're going to make money in the medical field, you have to leave from that job and start at another hospital. That's the only way you're going to get a real raise. And that's what I ended up doing. So I went from there making $6.48 an hour, and I think maybe I was making $6.84 an hour. And then I went over to another hospital to work making $9.77 an hour, which was big money, big difference, and that's how I ended up on the open heart team.
How long did you do that for?
I've been on about 4,500 surgeries total. As far as open hearts, we're talking, I counted them because they write the crew down on every single one of them. So before I left, I actually wrote down I actually counted how many open hearts that I'd been on. And I think it's close to 500. It was like 450 to 500. Enough to where, I'll tell you a funny story real quick. So when I went over there, the surgeon that worked at this other hospital, he had a reputation of just being just a complete monster. I mean, somebody that would throw instruments, loved the F word, somebody that just was not very, very patient. And I remember telling him over there, I'd never worked with him before. I just heard about this guy. And I told him, I said, "Hey, listen," they said, "we want you to work on the open heart team." I said, "I've never done open hearts. That's hundreds of other instruments, right?" And I said, I don't know about that. And they said, "Well, we really need you on that team." And I said, "Okay, I'll do it under one condition. You let him know I don't know what the heck I'm doing, and you're going to have to train me." And you know how that works. They stick me on the instrument table, and I'm on an open heart surgery, and I don't know what in the heck I'm doing. And I remember him going, I'm not even gonna repeat what he was saying, but he was like, come on. It was stressful, man. It was a stressful deal. It got so bad. Here's what I ended up doing. I ended up getting a sterile marker, and I would write down the procedure on top of the table with that sterile marker. And then I would take a picture of that. And then I went home and I started memorizing the procedure. And what I did, my goal was, and I got to a point where I literally I loved slapping the instruments in their hands to the point where it was like, pop. To the point where they're like, "Stop doing that." But I never wanted them to ever speak. I didn't want to hear them speak. So my goal is to go through a whole procedure with them just putting their hand out. And I knew exactly what they wanted. And I did that for the most part, But that was also a great experience. And that's what I did. So to the answer to your question, I've always wanted to be a homicide detective since I was a little kid, and since I was about 6. And that's kind of, there were some events that happened in the world. Waco was one of them. When I saw that, I would see that standoff. It was a 51-day standoff, and it just kind of drove me crazy. And I always wanted to be a homicide detective. I just got sidetracked. And so that kind of got me motivated in my mind. Hey, man, I would really like to be out there and negotiate with these guys. And then from there, the O.J. Simpson case happened. And then from there, the Oklahoma City bombing happened, and that I heard that. I mean, everybody, if you were in Oklahoma City and you lived there and you were awake, you heard the blast. So that was the other reason that I was like, you know what, screw this. I'm gonna try to become a homicide detective, and that's what I did. And I got on the Tulsa Police Department, and the rest is history.
Cody, have you
What year
ever
was that?
seen?
I got on the department in '98. It's funny. I started at the Burn Center July the 6th, 1988. I started at Midwest City. I went from there to surgery, so stayed at the same hospital. I started at Midwest City Hospital July the 6th, 1996. No, I'm sorry. 1991, I think. I don't remember. 92. No, it was 92. And then I started at Tulsa Police Department July the 6th, 98. So I've started everywhere at July the 6th for some reason. And so I started in 98. I've never quit a job either. I just told them, don't put me back on the schedule. And so, anyway.
Rudy, have you ever seen an open heart surgery before?
No, not unless you count witnessing it in the ER on patients that I've brought in. That's not really open heart. That's just
there's a
that's a different
well,
procedure.
I mean, it's similar.
Yeah,
There's a
when they're-
funny
when they're-
story that
Yeah.
there's a funny story that my good friend Kelly likes to tell. Kelly's a Fort Wayne firefighter. Him and I have known each other for quite a while, but he talks about the first time that he met my wife Beth. And Beth is a nurse practitioner with the trauma team for a local trauma hospital here in town. And he always tells the story of he brings this patient in and she cracks this patient's chest open and she is literally massaging the heart, trying to save this guy. And she yells over at him to come over there because she wants to ask him some more questions, get another, more detailed report of what happened to this guy. And he always talks about how he walks over there and he's just staring at this guy's open chest and his eyes are like the size of saucers. And she's like, I need you to focus. I need you to answer my questions. It always cracks me up every time I hear that.
Man, I loved it I loved the adrenaline. When we had to crack somebody's chest down in the emergency room, it was great because it was not good for them. I mean, never. But for me, it was the adrenaline rush was, the sterile technique didn't matter. It was just open up the stuff and get in there and try to save this guy's life. And it was pretty exciting stuff. But no, I got to do I would do whatever they would let me get away with, honestly. So the heart surgeons, I remember back then, some of the anesthesiologists, they would be like, hey, Dr. Jason, because if I saw him in fibrillation or something, I'd just tell the nurse, charge the paddles. I'd grab the paddles and just shock them, and I'd do whatever they would let me do, believe me. And it was quite an experience. But I'll tell you what, it like I said, it did pay dividends as far as, in that profession, you have to. It's my girlfriend at the time. She didn't quite understand why I was always tired all the time, and I was like, listen, man, you don't understand. This is stressful, mentally and physically. You're standing all day long. You're having to think, and you're looking at some horrific things to the human body. So much so that when I came to the police department, I'll tell you something. I had withdrawals. I literally had withdrawals from not seeing all the blood. And I was like, man, I thought being a cop man, I'd be seeing some crazy stuff, and it was kind of boring. I was like, man, where's all the craziness, where's all this just bizarre stuff? And it was almost like, you're around blood and guts and seeing, you're doing crazy things in there. You kind of miss it a little bit, the adrenaline.
So how was that transition going from, I guess let's start going into getting into the police department. How was that transition going from what you were doing, now you're going into the police academy? What was that like?
Well, the Tulsa Police Department, I just to give you an idea of what my life was like, when I worked full-time in open heart surgery, I was on call every other week. And I was going to college full-time. As a matter of fact, I had a couple of semesters that I took 18 or 21 college credit hours in a semester. So I'm going full time there. I was in the Navy Reserves. I was attending a reserve police academy at that same time. I was doing all this stuff, and it doesn't even sound possible at this point. I became a master of how to take college classes with the least amount of effort possible. I would do whatever the least amount I had to do to get through it, and I'm still making good grades at it. And so I've accomplished. I got my bachelor's degree. That is the requirement for the Tulsa Police Department, is a bachelor's degree requirement, and it's one of a very small amount in the country. And so when I came up here, thank God that our police academy was not. It was more like a college experience. Don't get me wrong. They would run you into the ground, and there were moments of abuse, both physical and mental abuse. Trust me. But for the most part, it wasn't crazy. They treated you like an adult, and you were able to do it. It was a 26-week academy, the longest in the state. And I mean, of course, I was worried sick that I wasn't going to make it. You know what I mean? I was really worried that I wouldn't make it. I was always kind of like freaking out about shooting. I've never really enjoyed shooting, and still to this, I'm just not a fan of shooting. It's never been my thing. But the curriculum, the tests and stuff, they weren't that difficult. And it wasn't too terribly bad. The worst part about it for me was the fact that I wanted to get on Oklahoma City, but remember the bombing happened, and after that bombing had happened, they had 6,000 applicants for their police department. And so the guy that was the recruiter looked at me and he just kind of laughed and he's like, "Yeah, whatever, man. Are you related to the chief?" And I was like, "No." He didn't even look up, you know what I mean? And
If
so
you
when I
want
went
to
up to
boost recruitments, I mean,
yeah,
that's the one way that it happens is these big incidents like that.
yeah. Well, nowadays if
Fortunately,
yeah, well, I mean, nowadays if you're able to breathe and you haven't done meth in about a week, then you're eligible to apply.
Now,
another
so you get
unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So you get done with the academy. What's the next step after that?
All right. So from there, I worked the streets. I went up to North Tulsa. North Tulsa, at the time, it was kind of known as the rough side of town. It was the side of town that the way I heard it is that 1 year up there was like working 3 years anywhere else in the city. Just because of the violent crimes that you're exposed to, and there was a lot of homicides up there. There was a lot of foot chases, a lot of car pursuits. It was where the action was, and that's where I started out. I worked the streets up there, and I worked in the southwest part of our city for the first 4 years of my time on the police department. And then from there, I was a plainclothes investigator on our street crimes unit, where we targeted serial offenders, serial rapists, serial burglars, serial robbers. We would try to identify who these people were, and we'd try to catch them. And that's really what we were doing. And when we weren't doing that, I was getting massages and I was buying drugs. That's what I was doing, or picking up hookers. And so for work purposes,
So
Thank you for the clarification.
yes. So I did that, and then I went on to because I'm gonna blame it on 9/11. I think that police departments across the country kind of exhibited, or they kind of they had a budget crunch after 9/11 for some reason. I don't know if it was because federal funding kind of went down a little bit, but they ended up disbanding all of the street crimes units through our city, which was really stupid to do. But they did that, and then I ended up going over to our undercover. I was an undercover narcotics guy in our vice unit, which basically was the same thing I was already doing. And then from there, I asked them to. I actually got booted out of there, believe it or not. I was looking at federal agencies, and that was kind of an unwritten rule that if you were looking and you were kind of like applying for federal agencies, they would get rid of you. And so it was stupid, but that's what they did. And so I asked them to stick me in the farthest south part of our city where there's cows crossing the road, and they stuck me in the purple area in part of our city that is just crime ridden, man. That's where they stuck me. And so I worked there. I did that for a little bit. And then somebody asked me what I thought of the school resource officer position. And I said, "Oh, I don't, I think that's a great place to go if you're scared to be a cop." And he's like, "No, no, no, no." I didn't know, it's complete ignorance. Ignorance was set in. I didn't know what that job entailed. And he goes, "No, no, no, it's great. We'll send you to Phoenix. We'll send you to Phoenix for a couple of weeks of training." And I was like, "Okay, I think I'm in. That sounds cool." And so I ended up doing that for 2 years. And I told him my ultimate goal was to get to homicide. So that was the goal. And I told him, I said, they really wanted you to do like a 2-year commitment for that position because they spent a lot of money on you. And I said, "No, I'm not going to do the commitment thing, but I'll do the position. And if homicide comes up and I happen to leave from there, I don't want any hard feelings." And so I ended up staying there for 2 years. And then I ended up going to the crime scene unit at night. And then I ended up getting into homicide my third time. I got rejected the first 2 times, and then I got in there the third time. And I've never been one that likes to kiss anybody's rear end. So I'm just a hard worker. That's it. And so my wife keeps telling me, "Hey, maybe you should just be a little nicer." But I just, no, I'm not going to do it ever. So I'm a hard worker. That's what I do.
So I've always been told, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but I've been told like pretty much the whole area of Tulsa is pretty rough. What's you guys' crime rate like there?
We have a population of 413,000. We are a little bit smaller than Minneapolis and a little larger than Wichita or Bakersfield, depending upon what website you go to. 413,000 people. We're the 47th largest city in the country. And we've been known to lead the state in rapes, aggravated assaults, auto thefts, and robberies. And sometimes murders, believe it or not. Sometimes we've led the way with homicides more than Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City has a population of 660,000. They're the 27th largest city in the country. So Tulsa's really not a bad place. Here's the thing. If you're looking for trouble, you can find it. And most people that get victimized here, to include murders and such, most people that are murdered, it's because of the company that they're keeping. Very rarely do you get somebody that gets killed for a legitimate victim. I mean, that doesn't happen very often. So, but it does from time to time. My wife's cousin tragically got killed, and it's my case. I didn't even know the kid, but he wasn't doing anything to anybody. But the guy he was hanging around with was he was a seedy character. So both of them got killed, and so it's just the company that they were keeping. But no, Tulsa's not bad, actually. But the weird part about Tulsa, too, is they're like, well, you could get victimized anywhere in this city. I mean, it could happen any part of the city. We just don't have a spot of our city that's just crime. It could happen anywhere. Anyway, but it's not bad. It's not a bad place to live. It's a good place to raise a family. I know we're on TV a lot from the First 48, but we solve a lot of cases. That's why we're on there a lot. They like solves.
I want to get into that in just a minute, but I think Cody had a question. Do you have a question, Cody?
If I did, I don't remember what it is at this point.
Okay, so third time's a charm. You get into the crime scene area. How's that go? What's going on, everybody? Thanks for checking out this episode of The Debrief. If you like the show, please give us a follow on YouTube. Also, leave us a review, some comments. Let us know how we're doing. Greatly appreciate it. I want to give you some updates because I like to be as transparent as possible. I think more people should be that way, to be completely honest. But I started this podcast back in around July or August of 2024. And since then, it has continued to grow. We've brought on some amazing guests. And really at that time, I only had the intentions of talking to people that I knew, just giving them an opportunity to share their story. Because at the end of the day, if you've listened to any of my episodes, I talk about how important it is to get the things that are stuck in your brain out. Get all that stuff out so that it doesn't cause you problems in the future. But since then, like I said, we've continued to grow. I brought on Cody Randall as a co-host. Cody is an awesome addition to the show. I've known him for a long time, and him and I have worked together for a long time. So I think he's going to do some great things with us. We've also started migrating a lot of our episodes over to YouTube, still providing you quality content on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, but YouTube, it gets a little bit more personal because you can see our faces. Makes things a little bit easier. So some other things that we've done is we've created a Patreon account. So why Patreon? Well, one, we want to create a community of people, like-minded people, where we can all kind of help each other out. You know, when we're going through tough situations, we've had a bad call, bad run, whatever, there's a separate community for that. And it's away from Facebook and those algorithms and all of that. It does cost $5 a month, but here's why. Running a podcast isn't cheap. There's software costs, there's equipment costs, there's so many different things. And we have big goals for the future. At least I have big goals for the future. So let's first talk about what benefits you get for just paying only $5 a month to be a part of this community. One, you get to know who the guests are first. We're starting to get some bigger name guests on the show, and we want you to know first so that you have an opportunity to ask questions. On the Patreon account in that community, you'll get an opportunity to ask a question, and then we'll pick a couple of them to ask live on the show each time we record. You'll also get discounts on merchandise. We're starting to create some t-shirts, hopefully do some hats here in the future. I'm working on some challenge coins and a whole bunch of different things. So you'll get discounts on merchandise on there as well. And then monthly, we're going to do some live chats. We'll talk as a community. People can ask each other questions. We could talk about whatever you guys as a community would want to talk about. And there's going to be so many more options. I just only have a limited amount of time to talk about it. So again, as I mentioned, join the Patreon account. It's only $5 a month. You can go to debriefwithtyler.com. I've got a link there on how to sign up. We're also looking for sponsorship. So if you or someone you know is interested, really enjoys the content of the show and wants to be more a part of it, shoot us a message on the Debrief website and we can talk more about that. So for now, I appreciate every single one of you. Thanks for listening to The Debrief with Tyler Burns. Let's get back to the show.
Well, I got into the homicide unit on the third attempt, and I was working in crime scene. Very, very rare way to enter into homicide. It just doesn't happen very often. For whatever reason, the supervisors that I've come to know over the years, they just don't look at crime scene as like a real detective spot. You know, it's just kind of weird. It is a detective spot. So it's just not a natural way of getting into there. Usually they'll come from burglary, robbery, and then they'll get to homicide, you know? And so the third time, here's how, it's kind of a funny story too, how this ended up happening. And I certainly don't recommend this for anybody trying to get a job. But the third time around, they had an opening. And this is in a time when you'd have 10 or 12 people applying for one spot. And usually you were up against some really good candidates. And nowadays, you're lucky to get one guy. You know, they just don't want to work that hard. But back then, people did want to do that. And so I didn't put my application in. The third time, I didn't put it in. And I ended up getting a phone call from the supervisor. And he called me at home and he goes, "Where the F is your freaking paperwork?" And I said, "Well, I haven't turned it in." And he goes, "Why not?" And I said, "Well," and he was kind of yelling at me. And I said, "Well, I'm really not interested in being rejected yet a third time." And so he goes, I said, "I'm kind of thinking about maybe my possibilities of going to sex crimes or child crisis." And he goes, "Get your ass down there and turn that thing in." And so I did. And I remember my interview. I don't know what in the heck he looked like he was just pissed off during my interview. And I got a phone call like at 8:30 in the morning. My interview wasn't supposed to go till 9. And he calls me up and he goes, "Where the heck are you?" And I said, "I'm on my way. My interview isn't till 9 a.m. And he goes, "Well, you need to get here right away. The other guy canceled or whatever." So this is what I'm signing up for, right? This kind of crazy town stuff, right? And so I finally get there, and I'm already off center, man. I'm kind of pissed, to tell you the truth. And now I'm flustered, and I get in there, and it's him and some captain. And I remember during the interview and stuff, the captain was like, "Hey, have you ever thought about promoting?" And I said, "Yeah. And if I did, I want his job." And I remember he was looking at me like he wasn't pleased with that answer. And so I remember that the interview, it was like 15 or 20 minutes. It was like 15 or 20 minutes. It was kind of ridiculous. And he goes, "Well, that pretty much covers it." And I said, "No, that really doesn't cover it. I'm going to get my money's worth in this interview, and so are you. And we're going to continue to talk because you're going to get to know who I am and what's up." And we sat in there for another 20 minutes. I made him sit in there. I said, No, we're going to make this happen this time. And
who's interviewing who at this point?
Well, I would never, ever, I tell people this all the time. Don't ever do that. I would never recommend it again. But I was just so aggravated with the fact that I didn't get picked the first 2 times. And I was like, there's nobody on this department that wanted to be a homicide detective more than me, ever. And nobody in your unit that's wanted to do this since they were a kid. And like I said, I wanted to do it since I was 6 years old. And I lived close to the Sharon Tate house from the Manson murders, and the Hillside Stranglers were running around Los Angeles back when I was a kid. So I made the decision that's what I wanted to do then. And I was, I kind of had a little bit I was done with the good old boy system. I wanted to get in there because I deserved it. And so whether it was going to happen or not, I was going to get that job, period. I wasn't taking no for an answer. I wasn't. So, and I ended up getting it, and I've been in there ever since. And I've worked for on my 3rd supervisor now.
So how did your department end up being one of the ones on the first 48? How does that conversation even start? Hey, by the way, we're making a new TV show and we want your department.
Well, they kind of got on the radar because of another show that was being filmed in Tulsa before that. And it was called The Interrogators. And it was a show that was short-lived. And it was I was never on it. I wasn't up there when they were filming that show. But I think they ended up getting on there maybe 3 or 4 episodes, somewhere around there. I don't remember. But one of the executive producers on that show, her name is Erin McCarthy. She actually moved from that, and she moved to the first 48. Well, actually, not the first 48. It's called ITV. The first 48 buys the episodes, and that's where they're aired there. But it's not really the first 48 that actually films it. It's another company. But she ended up working for ITV, and I think she's an executive producer or something. I can't remember her title, but she went over there, and she'd already knew about Tulsa. She knew that they had a pretty good reputation for solving cases. So they started inquiring about that back then. I started hearing about it they started filming here in July of 2014, but I started hearing some rumblings about it about 2011 or 12 that they were really wanting to come here. And they ultimately, once that contract ran out on that other show, they reapproached Tulsa, and Tulsa said, "Sure, we'll do it." And I was the first detective to have a case filmed on there. They started filming one of my murders right out of the gate, and that's that. And they've been here ever since. They're still here. We've been filmed longer than we've been the 22nd city to be profiled on the show. They've filmed more episodes here than any other city, and they have been here longer than any other city. Now we've surpassed Miami in that area. Miami was one of the OG cities. They started out there. They were there for about 10 years, but now we're the king of the hill. They've been here longer than any other city, and it's been great. I'll tell you what. I don't know why. I'll mention this. I don't know why other cities aren't fighting for the chance to be on that show. It has been nothing but a positive experience for us. It's just been tremendous. We love it. 99.9% positive.
Pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
99.9 because I've had a couple of stalkers. So that's where the point. I know everybody's got a flavor. So I've had to tell somebody before, hey, you're not moving here. You're not coming to Oklahoma. Okay. I'm telling you, it's not going to happen. So anyway,
People, I tell you. No, I agree with you. Like, I'm not sure why more places don't want it. It's weird because I can tell you personally where we are located, at least up until recently, like trying to get the city to even release like body cam footage or dash cam footage or anything like that. They just wouldn't do it. Even when media would reach out and try to use the, Public Information Act or whatever to try to get that information, they would stall on it all the time. And up until recently, they've actually started to release that a little bit more. But with all these different shows like First 48 and Night Watch and what was Live PD and some of the other stuff, I thought those for sure was going to encourage a lot more areas, especially in Indiana, encourage a lot more departments to want to be on that. And that just hasn't been the case.
Well, in Indiana, they get a lot, or in Indianapolis, they get a lot of murders there. They get a ton of them. And I knew a homicide guy from there from back in the day. I couldn't tell you his name now, but I remember meeting him once, and he was telling me about how many murders they get. I was shocked. And they were on cops back in the day. I remember Indianapolis being on cops, and we're living in a different era now. We're living in a world of transparency. We're living in a world today of transparency, and really, we've got a really good relationship with the public here in Tulsa. By and large, we do. And one of the reasons why is because we get in front of things. We don't hold on to body cam footage of an officer-involved shooting. We don't hold it to where now then you got people starting to get ticked off, and you have certain sections of the community that are starting to raise Cain over it. We just release it right away, and that really has that's just been a better way of doing things. And I'll tell you one of the reasons that I think it is such a good experience to be a part of a program like that. I'll tell you, Live PD was here too, and I really didn't care much for that program. I'm actually shocked that it actually has the popularity that it does. I think that the First 48 is far more interesting, personally, but Live PD, man, I liked Cops better too. I just thought Cops was just a better type of a show because I grew up watching Cops, but Live PD was just kind of goofy to me, Oh, hey, we're gonna move over to this city, we're gonna do this, and it just looked funny. And I remember there was a couple of times when they would show up to these complexes and stuff, and they would have like another car behind the police car, and they would jump out with like boom mics and cameras all up in their faces and stuff. And I'm thinking, it's just a weird thing going on. But the public freaking loves it. They do. I think it's just boring, to tell you the truth. It's just, I don't know. But it was an interesting thing to watch because I liked watching I've seen it a handful of times. And I would tune in when Tulsa was on because I wanted to see how we stacked up professionalism-wise against other departments throughout the country. I just was interested to see how other people carried themselves, etc. But anyway, And I know that for those other cities that
there
are on
was-
live PD, man, they love it.
There was one episode that Fort Wayne Police was on there. It was only one, and it was, I want to say it was, he's not a police officer anymore, but his name was Tom Rhodes. And I think they had followed him around for a little while. But at one point, I worked at a prison down by Indianapolis. And I'll tell you, whenever I would go and do my walks in the different housing units, the number one TV show that was always on in every pod that everybody wanted to watch was Cops. And when I asked them, I would ask them, like, why do you guys watch Cops? Why do you like Cops so much? And they're like, oh, we're trying to see if we know anybody on there, trying to see if I was on there or some crap like that. And I'm like, all right, you guys are nuts.
They want to see who's snitching. They want to see and they're also educating themselves too. I mean, they're in prison. You know, the First 48's is a massively popular show, and which the bad part about that is when I went to the prisons to go talk to somebody on the down low. I've walked through. Sometimes they'll stick you like the visiting room, or you're walking into the visiting room, and it's like, oh my god, because people are like, they know you, and it's kind of like, you know, because I don't want this inmate to start having problems because I'm down there talking to him, you know. So, but.
So you had mentioned earlier in regards to, I think it was live PD, people jumping out of cars with cameras and boom mics. How does having cameras present during your investigation go? Does that affect it at all, or is it a different dynamic?
Well, they're very respectful to us. We are never gonna compromise an investigation for that camera, ever. So if we go to some place, there's some places that we go that I'll just be honest with you, there's no freaking way we're going to be bringing a camera with us. It's just not gonna happen. These individuals that we're dealing with, they have to live there, and if they had the financial means to move, they wouldn't be living there to begin with. So they don't want to be labeled as a. I hate the word snitch. I really do. I hate that word, but I like to think of it as a hero. But basically, it was weird when we first started filming here. I got to tell you this. It was just bizarre. We'd have a camera guy standing behind us, filming us, and the people that we were talking to never even made a mention of it. They wouldn't even say anything. Or if they did, I know for fun, I would tell them, I would mention to them, hey, don't worry about the camera, because they'd be like, what's that? Wait, and I'd be like, hey, don't worry about it. They're doing a true Hollywood story on me. So it's not about you, you know? And, but for the most part, nobody would really say anything about it. I think that the news crews were a little bit jealous, because when they would show up to a homicide and they have pretty much unprecedented access, they're inside of the tape, and they're filming inside of that tape, where those camera guys on the outside of the tape, they're like, we want to go. and so I think that was kind of one of those deals too. And nowadays, the public right now, they're 100% behind us, and they are, for by and large. Like I said, in places of the city, and it doesn't matter if it's here or anywhere else, they hate the cops. There's some places that generational. I mean, they've hated the cops forever, and it's weird because they still hate the cops, but we get a pass for the most part. I mean, they'll be like, they can't come in, but you're cool. I like you. Hey, can I get a picture? You know, that kind of stuff. And these are people that have hated the cops their whole lives, you know? So anyway.
It seemed like after the riots across the nation, or at least during that time, you know, it was really rough, and trying to get anybody to even want to apply for a police department was nearly impossible. But then there for a little while, it seemed like people were starting to like police again. And now it seems like it's starting to go the other direction, where we're going right back to where we were. People don't like police.
Well, I'll tell you, I teach a ton. You already know I speak, and I speak at high schools, and I speak at the college level. I'm not like a professor there, but I do guest speak. And there was a time when I noticed there was like I hate speaking to like 3 people. It's just miserable. I would rather speak to 500, you know? And there was literally like 3 students there. And I always ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? Why are you here? And there was a time when you'd get, well, I want to be an attorney. Oh yeah? What kind of attorney do you want to be? I want to be a defense attorney. Really? Why do you want to do that? Well, I want to ensure that the rights of the citizens aren't violated and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, all right. And so, not that that's not a good road to go. I like some defense attorneys too, but I was just like, wow, all right. And now I'm starting to see class sizes from the 3 that I would see. I'm starting to see class sizes of 10 to 12 to 15. And with some candidates that I actually believe they actually have criminal justice programs at the area high schools, and they're loaded with students. They are doing a curriculum at the VOTEX. VOTEX nowadays are nothing like they were when I went to school. When I went to school, it was full of stoners. I mean, it was the guys like you know, the guy on the Breakfast Club, Bender, where those were the kind of people that were going to VOTEC, And nowadays, it's not like that. That's kind of the way people are going. They're going for career paths. They want to make a lot of money. They don't want to incur a lot of school debt. And so my point is, they've got criminal justice programs in some of these VOTECs that are stellar. I mean, they're rocking it, man, and they've got the money in there. Matter of fact, since you guys worked in the ambulance field, I think you did. What did you do, Cody? Were you a medic?
So I'm a paramedic firefighter.
Okay. So they've got and you probably already know this, but they've got like a freaking ambulance that's a simulator that literally moves. I was like, I didn't even know they even had that kind of stuff. And the money that they pour into these programs is insane. Where they've got like fire trucks that are there and police cars, and man, that would have been something, back when I was a kid in high school. I probably would have went that route, but to just start out a little earlier.
We have a program here locally. It's called Anthus Career Center, and it's available for high school students. I believe you have to at least be a sophomore, I believe. But they offer, at least I think they still do, they offer a criminal justice program, which I took when I was in high school. It wasn't the greatest. You really didn't get anything out of it. It was basically like you were in basic training like the whole year. But they also offer a firefighter program, which you end up leaving with a certification. They started doing an EMT program, which by the time you're done, you have your EMT basic. I think now the criminal justice one, unless they changed it, I think you walk away with a certification as a dispatcher, which in Allen County and City of Fort Wayne, there's not really a certification process for that, but you walk away from it, or with that at least. But yeah, it's definitely been a popular thing here. And then we also have a hospital that has a sim lab, and they've got a ambulance with all the simulation on there as well. And then they've got a separate building that's got multiple sim labs in there for surgeries, you name it. It's got all of the state of the art equipment.
Yeah, it's amazing.
They got a hold of a big trailer now they have that they can set up like the inside of a house or what have you to run different scenarios through. But no, it's great to have.
It is. I'm glad that they're doing what they're doing, and they pour the money into those things. I think one of the crazy things that I don't necessarily agree with here in Tulsa is that for whatever reason, our police department has yet to get on board with partnering with the Tulsa Tech people, and I wish that they would, because that would be a great pipeline for us. But and maybe they're doing more of that now. I mean, I may be speaking out of turn, but I know that for a long time they really weren't, and they really should. Give them some old equipment. Let's get them excited about this, and let's start recruiting these people even before they get their degrees. It doesn't matter. You want them to want to come here and so forth. But no, I think it's great. All these simulators and all this stuff, and it's pretty amazing. I wouldn't mind teaching more often. It's crazy because I when I speak at a high school, and I just did this just the other day. I did 5 classes at one of the schools, and man, I show the real deal. I just make sure that all their parents are good with, they all have to sign waivers before they get to me, because I don't want to hear, you showed my kid what? And it's not like they're going to need counseling at the end of this, but I show them murder scenes, and we talk about the innovations in forensic science and all that cool stuff. And it's exciting to see as many of those kids today wanting to do this job. So you're right. The pendulum is swinging backwards towards loving cops again, and that's good. We needed to be there. It
should have always been there, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Well, I actually, believe it or not, I wanted to be a firefighter too, and
couldn't pass the test.
It was very, very. It was so competitive, man. It was like.
It really is.
It is super competitive. Everybody wants to do that, and I wanted to do that too. I still want to be a firefighter. As a matter of fact, I've been talking to some firefighters that are like arson investigators, and told them, I said, hey, listen, man, I need you to get me some bunker gear. I want my own bunker gear, and I want to start calling me to these fire deaths. And I want to be the guy that's kind of like a fire death expert, I'm not going to be an expert at it, but I want to be I want to corner the market with knowledge on fire deaths, because that's an area that we're really lacking in. And I want to just I'm going to go with you in these fires, and I want you to teach me what you're looking at. Instead, not that I'm going to be an arson investigator by any stretch, but I just think that as a homicide detective, we really owe it to we really should have more knowledge when it comes to that kind of stuff. And, maybe that'll happen. I don't know. But I still want some bunker gear because it's cool. I want to,
I mean, it's really cool in the wintertime. It's not so cool in the summertime when it's hot as hell outside.
That's true. At Kalamazoo, Michigan, in Kalamazoo, they have cops their cops are firefighters too. And they ride on the ambulances. They just bid what they want to do for their full-time gig. I was like, man, that's kind of cool, to do all three. But anyway,
I think they did that due to the shortage, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was a shortage on both sides of police and fire. But yeah, I do remember hearing about that.
It works for them.
So my family and I, we went out to eat. This was probably a couple months ago. We went out to Texas Roadhouse for dinner. We're sitting there waiting for him to call our name, and there's this family that sits right next to us. And over on the left-hand side from where we were sitting, there's a wall, and it's got the city fire coat, bunker coat hanging up on the wall. There's I think there was a police shirt or a vest or something hanging up, and a hat and all this stuff, and just honoring, the city's public safety personnel. And this one little girl, she was probably about 4 years old. And she goes, "Look, Daddy, there's a hose dragger up there." And my wife and I instantly look at each other. We look at her. We look at the dad, and he goes, "I am so sorry." And her mom speaks up, and she goes, "Yeah, her dad's a police officer, and she learned that." And I was like, "Huh? So you like donuts, huh?" And he just looked at me and he goes, "Let me guess, firefighter?" And I said, "Yeah."
Yeah.
We had a good laugh about it.
Yeah. I do
But
like
now
donuts.
my kid wants to be a cop. So now I'm like, oh man, here we go.
I got to grab something real quick. Let me step away for just a quick minute. I'm going to grab something to show you.
If he comes back with a box of donuts,
It would be kind of funny. I do want some donuts. In fact, a crew that I was working with the other day, they're not from this area. They're from another state. And they decided to go to Rise and Roll. And for those listening that don't know what Rise and Roll is an Amish donut bakery place. And they have these donuts. They're like giant donuts, probably about the size of Cody's face, honestly. And then they also have donut holes. Too. And they're called Amish crack donuts because you can't just eat one. Like once you start eating it, you're like, next thing you know, you've eaten 10.
So I got to show you.
Look at that.
Well, I got to show you this because this is kind of cool. So, I come from a firefighting family. As a matter of fact, my mom retired as a major with the Oklahoma City Fire Department. And we actually have a piece of the Murrah bombing, the building that my mom got from somebody after the bombing. But so this thing here, my great uncle was the fire chief of the Kansas City, Missouri Fire Department from 1882 to 1902. And he was world renowned. I mean, he was known throughout the world. He wrote books. He had 50 patents to his name. His name was George C. Hale. And this is one of his fire extinguishers that he invented. And isn't that cool? He's got his name on it and everything.
I definitely know the name.
Do you really? Really? Yeah, George C. Hale. He, so I had firefighting in my family, and I really wanted to do it. And I tried a handful of times. I tried like 3 times, and I even did ride-alongs with him. My mom arranged it to where I could I slept at the firehouse at Oklahoma City Fire Department, and they were kind enough to take me on a couple of ride-alongs for the 24-hour shift. And I was an Explorer Scout with them as well. But well, that's right. I did have my own bunker gear, because if they had like a third or a 3 alarm fire or greater, they would literally call us out, and we would go there and we would help them roll the fire hose. And so as a kid, I mean, how cool is that? To have your own bunker gear as a teenager, and you're out there on these fire scenes. I didn't get called out much, but it was still a neat experience, and I still want to do that.
You said that was your great grandfather?
A great uncle. Yeah.
Great uncle.
Yeah, he's my great uncle. And yeah, he was super famous. George C. Hale. Yeah, lots of patents to his name.
He has his own page on Wikipedia.
Yeah. And actually there was one of his badges ended up on the Antique Roadshow, and it was valued at like I think $8,000 to $10,000 or something. And the crazy part is that the guy that found it, he ended up he found it at a freaking garage sale. I was like, I would love to have that. You know what I mean? It's just priceless, but my dad remembers playing with like one of his fire helmets that was like white, and it was leather. And it's one of those things that just disappears when somebody dies, and one of the relatives ripped it off. We just we'll never know who. But the thing had like, it had like that huge thing on the front, that whatever, the shield. And there was like there was emeralds and rubies in this thing. This thing was priceless, but that fire extinguisher that I showed you, I got to tell you, let me tell you a quick story. I hope you don't mind. I love talking, obviously. I was walking from the station, and I was walking over to the courthouse, and this firefighter, I didn't know him, but he goes, "Hey man, good to see you again." And I'm like, "Hey, I don't know who this guy is. I don't even know the names of most of the cops that I work with." You know what I mean? So I'm like, "Hey," and the guy goes, "Hey, I'm a fire. You don't remember me, do you? I was on a death call like 10 years ago, and you were there." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And so anyway, I was like, "Well, okay, well then good to see you." And then I walked on, and then I saw him again. He was at the records window, and I was like, "Hey man, good to see you again." And he goes, "Yeah," and he goes, "Yeah, I was a firefighter for 27 years, and I retired." And I said, "Well, my great uncle was a real famous firefighter." And he goes, "Who was that?" And I said, "It was George C. Hill." And he goes, "Oh yeah, I know who he is." And I said, "He invented a fire extinguisher and stuff." He goes, "Yeah, I own one. I have one." I'm like, "No, you don't," because this is one of those things in my family that has been a mystery. We've heard of them. We know that they existed, but we'd never seen one, and every time you go to an antique shop, you're looking for one. If you see one, Cody, you better freaking call me. Get it, and I'll get it from you. All right. So I'll pay for it. So anyway, long story short of it, I didn't believe this guy. I was like, "Yeah, whatever, man. You don't really have it." He goes, "Oh, I do. I'm telling you." He's trying to pull it up on his iPad. And he goes, "Oh, here's my number." I said, "Just give me a ring sometime and send me a picture. I'd love to see it." And so he ends up coming up there to the station later on that day, and he had it with him. And I was already, the wheels were already going on in my brain. I'm like, how much am I going to be able to pay for this thing? What can I live with? Could I give this guy $500 for this? I'm trying to figure out. It's not worth $500, but to me, it's priceless. I've never had one of these. And so
I think there might actually be one. Sorry to interrupt, but I think we might actually have one of these at my station I work at.
Are you serious?
I don't know if it's a real one, or I don't know if it's real or not, but
wow.
No, I work tomorrow. I'll have to actually take a little.
I know there is a department locally that does have one. I just can't remember which department. I mean, there's like 10 departments in this.
That's an actual hail fire extinguisher.
I believe so.
Okay. Well, wow. All right. So I'm sitting there thinking, how much am I going to have to pay this guy to get this thing? And I said, "Hey, are you willing to sell it?" And he goes, No, it's yours. And I said, No. How much do you want? He goes, "From one brother to another, that belongs to you." And he gave it to me. I couldn't freaking believe it. And it's not that one. I actually found this one. The other one is the gold color, or it's in the other room, but
Brass.
It's the brass. Yeah, it's the brass one, and it's got a lot more patina to it. This one actually got restored or made it look really good. The reason why there's not many of these around anymore is because of World War I and II, because they were melting them down and doing whatever they were doing with these things. That's why they're very rare. But I couldn't believe it. As a matter of fact, in Kansas City, they used to have a firefighter museum, and it was really cool because when I went there years ago, I told them who I was, and they said, "Yeah, absolutely." They could see the family resemblance. We've kind of got the bags under our eyes a little bit. And they let me go wherever I wanted to in that firehouse. And I'm talking in the basement where it was spooky, man, probably freaking haunted and everything. But they had like those carriage fire trucks, and it was cool. And they didn't even have one of them. That's how rare that they are. They didn't even have a fire extinguisher either. So anyway, they I don't even think that they'd even seen one. But I could have probably went to Kansas City and became a firefighter there because of the relative angle. But it's way too freaking cold there for me, buddy. Kansas City is another cold on another level, and I don't want any part of that. But anyway, I figured you would appreciate that being a firefighter.
Yeah, I got a picture of your great uncle pull up right now, and I think if you grew out your stash the way this picture is, you might be able to pull it off.
Yeah, I used to have one. So, but yeah, it's kind of cool. A little bit of cool history, and I've been able to get a few of those over the years. I've got those too, and then I called one of my relatives in California and I said, hey, you got to get this, and they did. But anyway, it's neat. There's actually he was well known for the water pump. It was a water tower is what it was. It was a really long water tower, and it would spray. And they had a U.S. patent. And there's one of my relatives, and I don't know which, it's one of the Hales that lives in California. They supposedly have that down in their basement. Like there's one in Washington, D.C. It's a model of it, and then they have one as well. And my grandmother, who was a Hale, and she kind of signed off her rights to any fortune back in 1970 for like $2,500. And so my wing of the family has been the poor wing. But it's an interesting story. He wrote a book. I'm still trying to find that book. I'd love to find it, but he wrote a book. But him and his brother's name was Lon Hale. And I think actually George ended up either assaulted somebody and he ended up getting fired, or who knows, but it was something like that. But cool history. There's still a fire station that's up there that was around when he was around.
That's awesome. So, Jason, you also have a podcast. Do you want to kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I've been on a lot of podcasts over the years and stuff, and I enjoy talking, and I enjoy talking about what it is that we do and so forth. And I was a guest on one it's called iDetective, and it's on this KGRA. And it was a heck of a production, man. I mean, they had like 3 cops that were on there, and they had somebody behind the curtain that's running things and throwing videos up. And I was like, man, this is legit. This would be cool. And so I did the podcast, and the audio just sucked on my end. It was just, I thought it was terrible. And they were like, oh, this was great. I'm thinking, yeah, right. And so at the very end of it, they're like, hey, we're going to try to have you back, and maybe we'll have you guest host some night or so. And I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm thinking this is great, but I'm never really going to hear from these guys again, ever, because the audio was terrible. And so I ended up getting a call from them about 5 months later, and they said, hey, do you want your own show? And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? And now I'm scared, because this is something I always wanted to do, but to do it, that's a whole nother thing. And they gave me an opportunity. And so I know Into the Fire is kind of a weird name for a cop show, but I kind of liked it because of the Hale angle. And then I also liked it because there was a song called Fire by Saving Abel. It's a rock band. And I thought, man, that's the song. And I knew people that knew Saving Abel, the band. So I had them reach out to them and ask them if I could have permission. And they were like, oh, yeah. Oh, man, this is great. They were huge fans of the show, I guess. And when it came down to it, I guess one of the wives of one of the band members who was running things, I guess, she said no. And what ticked me off is that I had to come up with the name. And so now I was stuck with the name. And then they told me no. So that's why it's still called that. But nevertheless, they gave me an opportunity. I just did my 43rd episode last night. The premise of my show is basically movers and shakers in the world of criminal justice. People it's a positive thing. I don't do anything controversial because I still work on the job. I don't want to end up in adult timeout at work or be removed. And so I can't talk about anything that's current event wise for the most part. And I just bring people on that are really, really special people that have made positive impacts in the world. There was a girl that I even have a prisoner that came on there. She was an inmate from she was in prison in Illinois. I went up there to go interview somebody, and she wasn't supposed to be talking to us, but she saw me in the lobby, and she goes, I know who you are. And I was like, hey, how are you? And I said, how do you know me? And she told me, she goes, we watch you in the cell block and all the time. And she was just excited and stuff. And she ended up reaching out to me after she got out of prison. She reached out to me on Instagram to tell me she was out of prison. And I was so impressed with her story. I had her on. She was my second guest, episode number 2. And she's an amazing person. She was an RN that got addicted to methamphetamine for 17 years and spent some time in prison. Super, super person. I mean, I love her. And so I pick people on there that are absolutely epic people that I have to be impressed with them. I get people all the time that are like, how come you don't have this person on there or that person? First of all, I have to like them. And number 2, I have to be impressed with them, And so I've had some cool people. I've had Gil Carrillo, the lead detective of the Night Stalker case. I've had one of Ted Bundy's victims, Kathy Kleiner, who was nearly beaten to death at the Chi Omega sorority house, and two of her sorority sisters were brutally killed by Ted Bundy, and her roommate actually survived, but they were both nearly beaten to death. And the only reason why they're even alive is because somebody pulled into the driveway and it shined the light in the room. But I like guests that are people that are really interesting. Last night I had somebody on. We were talking about flock cameras, and then the week before that, this guy was a special treat. He's a Manson historian. I mean, this guy is epic. His name's Scott Michaels, and he put together that documentary 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter, and so that's what's about. It's a healthy hobby. My wife she still doesn't like the fact that it's on Friday nights. She hates that. And but we go live every Friday night. You can check it out. For your listeners, here's what you do. Go to Detective Jason White or YouTube. Just go to my YouTube page, Detective Jason White. Please subscribe, and I would appreciate it. So, but anyway, that's what's up. I know we've talked a little bit about it. Congratulations on your podcast. It's great. Love it.
Yeah, appreciate it. Definitely. And we definitely I try to check out yours as well. And one of these days I'm going to make one of the live sessions. We run into the same situation where we typically record on a Friday or Saturday night. But I think we've got usually when Cody is working, because he's got that 24/48, we don't record on those nights. So that kind of gives me an opportunity to check it out as well.
Well, I'll tell you what, I messaged. Did you watch Chips at all? Have you ever seen Chips?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I had messaged Larry Wilcox, and Larry Wilcox was John, right? There's Paunch and John. So I sent him hey, how are you, Beth? Good to see you again.
He said, hey, how are you?
So
I'm just looking over here. I had his YouTube channel pulled up, and I look over, and Beth's in the background waving.
That's great. So anyway, what was the deal? I messaged him on Twitter, and I never got a response from this guy. And I was like, all right. I told him, I said, hey, I want you to come on my show. My dad used to be a highway patrolman. This would be cool. And he just messaged me back, like, I think it was March the 5th. And he goes, yeah, I'll do it. But I can't get him to freaking message me. So, but I'm hopeful that I'm going to be able to get him to come on. That'd be awesome, to have John from Chips on my podcast. How cool would that be? He's a fascinating guy. Anyway, he was a Marine and a Vietnam vet, and the guy's got one heck of a story. He's just a really, really neat individual. It's going to happen because I don't take no for an answer. At least I hope.
Your stories about how you got into homicide pretty much tell me you're not a type of person that takes no for an answer.
Well, most homicide guys are like that, I guess. We're pretty persistent. But anyway.
So over the course of all of your different careers that you have done, and this is kind of one of the main points of our show too, is discussing mental health. What's been your number one method of keeping this stuff from just driving you absolutely crazy, the things that you've seen and you've dealt with? What have you done that has helped you out?
Well, the podcast is one of those things. It's a healthy habit for me. It's something that kind of gets my mind on other things. I try to, I'm trying to read a little bit more, do things like that. I got to tell you, in 2024, I caught a murder on January the 1st of a 12-year-old that got killed at an Airbnb. And as I stood there at this house, looking at this young man that was dead, I was like, I was physically nauseated. I mean, I stood there in the living room and I felt sick to my stomach. And I remember in my brain, I was going, have I reached that point where I've seen enough? I mean, I've been the lead on 115 of them now. I've assisted on probably 600 others. And I thought, maybe I've just seen enough. Maybe that's it. And then February the 23rd, I got another murder, and it was a domestic murder that was just horrific. I mean, on a whole nother level bad. And I was kind of sick to my stomach then. And then I was like, and then all of a sudden I was like, no, this is good. I'm still human, and this should affect me. And I think that for anybody that does this job, your jobs, any kind of job in this world that's like dealing with tragedy and things like that, if it doesn't affect you, then you shouldn't be doing the job. I'm one of those people that, do I dream about this kind of stuff? Yeah. I still even dream about the burn center, believe it or not. I don't know that that's healthy or not, but I can usually tell myself in the dream and go, okay, I'm dreaming. I'm back at the burn center, and this is a dream. I don't know. I've had stints where I exercise, and I think that's one of those times that, to tell you the truth, there's a program that exists here in Tulsa, and I'm gonna put a plug in for it. It's called Fit First Responders, and if you go to fitfirstresponders, I think .com, you can actually sign up and be a part of their online workouts and stuff like that as well. And it's specifically geared for first responders, and they have the main places right here in Tulsa. And they actually, as a matter of fact, as a first responder, I'll tell you guys this. You go on there and you can get a free book. They'll send you a free book being a first responder. So go to their site and request a free book telling them that you're a first responder, and they'll send you a free copy, and just start reading through it. But they only charge $25 for a month, and for first responders, they run challenges through there. But what I really enjoyed about it, and I need to get my rear end down there and start working out again. But I hate that part when you're working out where you're just miserable because you're so sore and just you feel like you're going to die. So I don't want to go through that again. I mean, I hate that. But it's great to be around other first responders, firefighters, to be able to meet firefighters and just on a different level, and medics and other cops that you don't necessarily get to know, and you're kind of going through the same experience together. I think that's something for anybody that's in your listening audience that's a first responder. You should really think about maybe working out, and all you got to do is 3 times a week for an hour each time, and you're going to transform your life. You will be a totally different human being, And so I just need to get my rear end down there to do that again. But I don't know. I think that would be the good thing, and try to separate yourself somewhat from that all the time. I'm a little obsessed with homicides. I'm obsessed with what we do. I like reading about it. I like learning. I like speaking about it. And that's the other thing I do too. I'll just tell you guys, I teach all over the country. So when I'm lucky enough to get gigs and I get to go to different places, I love doing that too, because the best way to learn is to teach others. And so, and to hang out with like-minded individuals, etc. But yeah, that's kind of what I do as my little hobbies on the side. I'm going to probably write a book if I could sit down and start typing, but I'd like to write a book, and I don't know if it'll be great or not, but it'll be satisfying to be able to say that you've done it. And a lot of the people I've had on my podcast have written books. I am on the cover of one of them. I wrote the foreword for somebody. It's called Work Aside, and I just think that would be a neat experience to write a book. I don't know that anybody would really buy it, but I would hope that they would.
When you write it, let me know. I'll buy one. Then I'll just need an autograph from you.
If I write one, I'll send you one for free. I mean, that's probably going to be my biggest downfall, is I'll be giving them out for free. But yeah,
I agree with you with the working out though. Like while you're doing it, it sucks. But when you get done, you feel great.
You do. You feel great. And it's probably an excuse. I liked working out at 7 p.m. They used to have a 7 p.m. session. And I liked that time because, number one, I hate getting up in the morning. I hate it. And I hated the early one. But when I did go to the early ones, I felt fantastic the rest of the day. Mm-hmm. And but I liked that night session because it was a lot of the old people that were like myself, and I didn't have all and the way they work out there, you have a lot of people going, come on, you can do it. And I have to have that. You know what I mean?
That cheerleading section.
Yes. If it wasn't for that, man, I wouldn't push myself. You know what I mean? So I have to have that. But I really do need to do that. That's the best thing I ever did when I did those periods of time in my life. It was fantastic. And I just need to do it more. And really, I think another thing too is just kind of including your spouse into what when they're asking you what, I get it. As your spouses, a lot of times they're curious, they want to know, and sometimes you just don't really want to talk about it. You're just like, listen, I don't want to talk about it. But I think that you really should make an effort to include them. and part of that and let them hear what's going on.
Yeah, I ran into that situation when I was still in EMS. There were times I worked night shift, and there were times where I'd come home, at the end of the shifts, and I would just sit in my truck for an hour.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
my wife working in the job she did, I could talk to her and she would understand it. But there were some times where, like you said, you just don't want to talk about it. You just
Let me
don't wanna
tell you
deal
a
with it.
story. Let me tell you a story. There used to be a show on HBO. It was called America Undercover, and you may remember it. It was like a documentary series. They would have different things on each month or whatever, and it was really well done. It was done by HBO, so it's going to be first rate, And they had an episode on there, and I remember it still to this day. I've probably got it on a VHS tape up in my attic. You can't find it anywhere. They pulled it. That you can't find it on YouTube. I've never been able to see this thing anywhere as far as an episode, but this episode is about the Memphis Police Department, and it's about PTSD. Okay. And they talk about, there's like several different stories that they talk about. And one of them was a situation where a cop goes to a house, and then the people at the house end up holding this cop hostage, and that proceeds to they torture this guy to death over the course of like 3 days. It turned into a SWAT call out, and there was cops up on the roof of the house, and they could hear this cop pleading for them to kill him. He'd had enough. And then the cops ultimately made entry into the residence, and they ended up killing everybody. They shot and killed all 5 people that were in the house, 4 or 5 people, I think. But that's not the story I wanted to tell you. I'm just telling you that's just one of the stories that were in this documentary. So there's this one cop, and I remember this very well. The cop, he goes to a suicidal juvenile call, and this girl is like 12 years old. He shows up at the house, and I don't know where the parents are in this story. I don't remember. I need to watch it again. I need to find it and watch it again. But they show up to this house, and the cop sees the 12-year-old, and she's sitting on the edge of her bed, and he goes, "Hey, I got a call here that you're suicidal." And she goes, "Oh, I'm okay." And he goes, "Yeah, but today's your birthday, right? I mean, you should be happy today." And she's like, "Yeah, I'm just a little depressed." And he's like, "Are you sure you're okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'll be okay." And then he leaves. About 3 minutes later, this cop gets a call to go back because now the little girl's got a gun to her head. And the cop goes back, and when he arrives at the house, he sees her at the end of the hall, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, put the gun down. What are you doing? Put that gun down." And she's like, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." And then she pulls the trigger, and she shoots and kills herself. And the cop, at that moment, he ends up calling for extra cops. Supervisors are showing up. Crime scene shows up. Homicide shows up. And then his supervisor goes, "Go ahead and do your report and then go 10-8, which means go back into service to take another call. That is the way things used to be in this business. Okay. It used to be that way, to where you just shrug things off. "Oh, you're tough. You'll be fine. You'll be fine." And you just have to kind of maintain that masculinity, or if you're the lady, you just have to maintain that level of "nothing bothers me. We're all good." And that's not the way they do things now in our industry. Thank God for that. They have programs like peer-to-peer that has started up. That's kind of a thing that wasn't around 6 years ago, probably. Before that, they had the critical incidents response team, and that's what I'm a member of. I'm still a member of it. I think there's only like 6 or 7 of us that are original people from that team. You have to have been involved in something like a shooting, and I was involved in an officer-involved shooting back in the day, or some other kind of horrific kind of an event that you have to have been involved in something like that, and you exhibited that you handled it appropriately. That's how you get on that team, to be there for your fellow officer. And so thank heavens that's what they're doing nowadays, is they're concerned about your wellness. I had a gun stuck in my stomach back in Valentine's Day of 2000, a fight for my life. And that's not the shooting I was involved in. That was another deal. And I remember we fought this guy for several minutes on the ground. And then after that happened, we took him down to the station, and my boss comes in there and he goes, "You two go home." It was me and this other cop. And we were ramped up, man. We were ready to go back out. I'd been a cop for 5 minutes, you know what I mean? I was ready to go out and catch somebody else, Let's go. Let's get another one, And I just had a freaking gun stuck in my stomach in this fight for my life. And I remember he goes, "Go home. Go home." Well, I'm thinking I did something wrong, I'm a little bit worried. And he goes, No, you didn't do anything wrong." He goes, "Just go home." And I remember I went home, And I'm sitting on my couch and I was like, oh my gosh, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I almost died tonight. I could have died, you know? And what they were doing is they were just making sure that we're okay upstairs. And our department has the vision to know that that's an important thing. And then there's several other programs that exist out there in the world, like Mighty Oaks, and there's another company that's out of that comes to Oklahoma City or Oklahoma. I can't remember the name of it, but where they'll go for free. You can go there for free and do EMDR therapy. I will recommend to you guys. I'll mention this for your listeners. If you're a first responder, you can go to YouTube and pull up EMDR music. And if you'll play that on your cell phone at night, just stick it on your nightstand and let that music play. And what that does is it actually it allows your brain to take all those JPEG files of all this crazy nonsense that you're dealing with, and it helps your brain absorb it and put it to where it needs to be. And you'll sleep better. You'll just sleep better. You'll be better, and things like that. They sell fidget toys too that you can kind of have. There's one of my episodes. It's the one with I can't remember the number of it, but it's one of the ones with a medical examiner. Alexis Gage is her name. That's the episode, and we talk about that because she talked about an episode. I don't want to go too far on this if you guys have to run, but on this particular deal, she talks about an incident where she went to a call. In our world, we've got to do like 2 hours of mental health training, which I'd rather almost regrow my wisdom teeth and have them repulled than to sit through that training. It's usually the worst training of them all, right? And while I was there, this girl gets up there and she's speaking about it. I'd never met her before. She's a medical examiner investigator from Oklahoma City, and she went to a call where there was a dead baby in a trash can, and the grandmother had actually murdered I think it was a 1.5 or 2-year-old baby. And to your listeners that are listening to this, I do talk about graphic stuff, so I apologize. But anyway, so she said when she reached in there to get the baby, she felt something inside of her body that made her feel broke. It's like she just knew right then and there something happened inside, and she couldn't explain it, but she didn't feel right. And then she puts the baby down on the bag, and she started tearing up and crying. And then she noticed that she was having more and more situations of that, you know. And from there, they invited her to go to some debrief session in reference to that. And as she's like, I'm okay. And they're like, no, you really should come along. You really should come. And this was Oklahoma City PD that was doing this. So, you know, kudos to them. And they invited her to this. And then all of a sudden she realized, oh, wait, maybe I'm not all right. And so she gave this presentation, and I'd never met her, but I was so proud of her. I was like, that's tough to stand in front of your peers in law enforcement, in the medical examiner's office, and scientists and all this stuff, because it's through IAI, and to stand up there and share this story because it's very personal. So she's the one that told me about those little fidget toys and aromatherapy and EMDR music. And so me and my wife, we listen to EMDR music at night, and I sleep better, you know, so I guess something's working. And, you know, it's just something, it's free, and that stuff's free. Okay. So to your listeners, give it a shot. And I've just taught you guys something. And if you didn't know about it, and it's free, and you'll benefit from it.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. I think things are getting better in the public safety field as far as departments actually looking out for their people, especially after horrific calls. I think it's taking a lot longer than it should take. You know, I can tell you there was several horrific calls that I had been on when I was working in EMS, and, you know, you'd get somebody that would come up to you and be like, hey, you doing all right? Yeah, I'm fine. You know, because again, you don't want to talk about it, but you know, it was the same thing, you know, finish taking the patient or whatever, and get back in service. We've got more calls pending. And I think it's getting better. I still think we have a long way to go. I think the mentality of, you know, this isn't your emergency. You need to suck it up and move on and deal with it. I think that's still very prevalent. Not as much as it was probably 6 or 8 years ago, but you know, it's still very much prevalent.
I was training a cop. I got to train 2 of them, and I was training one of them. And I needed a break from this guy. Honestly, he was driving me freaking crazy. And so I had a break, but they had a double murder that happened, and they had 2 females that were bound, and it was a horrific murder. I mean, you could tell they'd been brutally raped, and They were bound and laying next to the road. And I called him up and I told the other training officer, I said, bring him up here. He's working this case. This was a guy that would never stay late. It was 4:00. Got to go. I got to go home. I'm thinking, dude. So I told him, I said, bring him up here. He's going to do the original report on this. We're not going home until they solve this case. Period. I was working as a school resource officer, I think at the time. I can't remember. But so as we're working this case, they needed to go do a death notification. And I said to them, we'll do it. We'll do it because we needed to check that off out of our recipe book. And so I tell them how to do it. We go to this house, and I remember the girl's name was Angela Bassett was the victim's name. And we went to her parents' house, and I told them what to do. And we get there to the house, and we get invited in, and he just vapor locks, man. He doesn't even speak. He's just standing there like he can't say anything. So we've got like 30 seconds of uncomfortable him staring at these people. And so I ended up just going ahead and doing it. And we stayed there for a while. And then we go to the police car. And when we get to the police car, he breaks down and he starts bawling and just crying his eyes out. And he's apologetic. And I'm like, no, I'm so proud of you right now. Don't you ever, ever lose that. Don't ever, ever stop being a human out here and treating people the way they need to be treated. And the best advice that my dad ever gave me was that he always said, make sure that your badge is the same size it was the day they issued it to you, not 5 sizes too big. Meaning, treat people right. It doesn't say anywhere in the rule book that you can't be nice to people. And I'm not advocating back rubs in the community. I'm just saying safety first, but you can still be nice to people most generally. And if you handle your career like that, you'd be amazed at how much nicer the world is to you right back, And so that's been some really good advice that I try to share with everybody that will listen to me, and hopefully it kind of rubs off on them a little bit if they're not that kind of a person, And because cops are like toys in a Cracker Jacks box. We're all different, and you get some that I can't stand them too. You know what I mean? They're just not nice people. But anyway, I have ran on and on and on. I apologize, but
No, this was
No, it's
awesome.
great.
Well, I think Jason, I definitely appreciate you joining us. This has been an amazing episode, and I know I
Right.
learned a lot. Truly appreciate it. Cody, do you have any final words, questions, anything like that?
No, I'm definitely gonna do some of that EMDR music tonight, though, and
Yeah, for
and
sure.
see what that does. No, thank you for taking the time to talk with us. It sounds like you've had a very illustrious career in healthcare and law enforcement, and I appreciate you talking with us.
oh, my pleasure. I've got about another 8 years left, health permitting. They just raised our retirement from 75% to 90%. So if you're interested, anybody in the listening audience, our cops top out right now at about 105, which means, and that's with no overtime, which means that when you retire, you don't even have to leave your house and you could make $93,000 a year. And 30 years from now, it'll probably be $150,000 a year. They keep throwing money at us because nobody wants to do this. So come on, keep throwing the money.
What do you think I can convince Beth to move out to Oklahoma?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Well, you'd love it here. If you're under 45, come visit the state of Oklahoma, and we'll see about getting you on the police department. And we're looking for good people. So anyway, no, listen, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. I hope that I wish you great things on your podcast, and really, I've been honored to be a part of it, and thank you very much. It means the world.
Definitely appreciate you. The last question I have for you, did you receive the patch that we mailed to you?
I haven't gotten it yet, but I will definitely check the mailroom. It hasn't arrived yet. I haven't gotten it yet. All right. And I worked Friday, but I don't know if our secretary, so usually it's probably in the mailroom. I'll go check when I get Monday. I'll check. I love the patch. It's the mayor of Fort Wayne. Who was that?
Harry Balls, former mayor of Fort Wayne.
Yeah.
I'm a part of a motorcycle club that is all firefighters, medics, dispatchers. We got nurses. We got a whole bunch of everything. And we're a neutral organization. We go and support the community. We do a lot of cool things like that. International, national organization. But one of the things that a lot of our stations, we call them stations instead of chapters, but one of the things that our stations do is they create their own patch. And the Fort Wayne area created a patch called with Harry Balls on there and showing, that's what Fort Wayne is known for, is for having a mayor by the name of Harry Balls. And in fact, at one point, there was a road being renamed in the Fort Wayne area, and they were naming it the Harry Balls Road. It was all over the media. Media threw a big fit about it, and they kept trying to say Harry Bales. Well, the family of that individual came on the media and was like, hey, you need to stop telling people this. It's not Bales, it's Balls. Pronounce our name correctly. And they made a huge stink about it.
Yeah, and there was a poll for the government facility downtown, and I don't know what they thought they were going to get when they said, hey, we want the public to help us name it, because the Harry Balls Center is actually what won that poll, and it's not the Harry Balls Government Center or what have you. It's Citizens Square.
Yeah.
Are you Cody? Are you in Fort Wayne as well?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I've met a couple of Fort Wayne cops over the years. They've spoke. We've met each other when they're speaking and I'm speaking. But yeah, that's crazy. His parents must have really hated him. I don't know who would have ever freaking named their child that. Is crazy.
Probably wasn't slang for what it means now back then.
I guess not. But man, that's crazy. So anyway,
do you have any idea of where you're going to be speaking at next, in case anybody's interested in listening to you?
Well, as far as to the public, I'm going to be speaking in Palm Springs. That's going to be at a crime prevention conference, and I love Palm Springs. It's the one place on earth where you don't ever see any homeless people or graffiti. They just don't allow that there. It's like going to the Twilight Zone, and it's beautiful. And then let's see, I may be speaking. Well, this isn't going to be to the public, but I think I'm going to be speaking in North Carolina twice. They have 2 conferences for homicide, so they have one on the beach and one up in the Smoky Mountains. So they when they bring somebody, usually you'll go 2 different times, which is awesome. I'd like to go there. I haven't spoke there. But to the public, and I'm trying to think, there might be some other place I might be speaking at. I just don't remember off the top of my head. But I spoke to the public at the U.S. Marshals Museum in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and they sold tickets to this event. I was shocked. The thing sold out at 250 tickets pretty quick. And they were charging for these tickets. And so I told them, I said, hey, man, I've still got people that are asking me about this. Is there any way you guys could have more seats? So they made it 300 and it sold out there. And so I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is great. And it was a crowd of all normal people that were really, really, it was a great experience. And the U.S. Marshal Museum was absolutely spectacular. They've asked me to do it again, and I may do that. They wanted me to kind of do it either in October or November. If that happens, I'll certainly publicize it a little bit. And, you guys need to make the drive down to Fort Smith, Arkansas and catch a show. But I'm actually talking to a radio station up in Maine. His wife is a super fan, and she's like, well, they actually bought tickets. They were going to come down there. They own like 5 radio stations up in Maine. And I said, well, don't just save your money, man. Have me come up to Maine. I'd rather go up there than you come in here. And well, matter of fact, why don't we just try to sell some tickets to nothing expensive, like $10, $5, who cares? But just something to where we could at least pay for the venue. And so I would like to do that occasionally. I would like to do that like maybe 2 or 3 times in the year. But I think it'd be a lot of fun. It's just a matter. I was shocked that 300 people showed up to this event. But most of the speaking that I do is not generally to the public, but I do enjoy speaking to the public. So if people were to follow along on my Instagram, Detective Jason White or DET Jason White, or they follow me on Twitter or my YouTube page, they can message me there. I will keep people updated if there's going to be any civilian events. And because those are fun. Those are more fun to me than the cop shows, to tell you the truth, But anyway, we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. I don't know.
All right.
I will tell you this, though. I almost forgot. I may be the speaker in 2026 in Indianapolis at that coroner convention, the Indiana Coroner Association. So if your wife's still a coroner, then you guys need to go. I sent them their speaker last year, which was Barbara Butcher, a medical examiner investigator from New York City. And then I also got them to call Gil Carrillo, the Night Stalker lead detective, and he's going to be their speaker. He's going to be their speaker this year. So that would be one to go. If she's still a coroner, you guys should go check out Gil. He's fun. He's a good dude. But anyway, and then so 2026, they've asked me if I would do it in 2026, and I told them I would. So unless something changes, I'll be back in Indianapolis. So if that happens, we'll have to go get a drink or, whatever, make a trip down there and so forth. Meet you guys. All right.
Yeah, for sure. All right. With that, that wraps up this episode. Appreciate you all, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks again,
Thank
Jason.
you. See ya.